Pay close attention to this security camera footage. In Inglewood, California, a CCTV camera mounted in front of a suburban house captures exactly 47 seconds. You see a 36-year-old black man wearing a thin jacket, holding a wallet, standing at the front porch. He hesitates for a beat, then knocks on the door. The door opens. Another man appears, hair neatly cut, light-colored shirt, offering a polite smile. They exchange a few brief gestures. The black man holds out the wallet. The other man nods. He steps aside. The black man crosses the threshold. No struggle, no shouting, no signs of danger. At 3:18 p.m., the door closes. Marcus Reed disappears from the camera's view. 9 days later, a maintenance worker discovers a body by the banks of the Los Angeles River. No signs of robbery, no possessions taken. Just a man who had been dead for days while his family and the police still believed he had left voluntarily. Most people thought this was a random tragedy, a kindness in the wrong place. Wrong. This was not random, not a robbery, and Marcus Reed was not the only one who stepped through that door. He was just the only one found. Marcus Reed, a night shift IT logistics worker, lived a repetitive and quiet life in Pasadena, California. He found a wallet and did what he always did. Tried to return it to its owner. Maybe it was just an ordinary act of kindness. Maybe an impulsive decision after long, tiring hours at work. Maybe he just saw a name and an address and thought knocking on the door to return the wallet was the right thing to do. A misunderstanding. A minor incident. A situation no one needed to worry about. The kind of thing that happens every day in quiet suburban neighborhoods across America. That was what local police believed in the first hours when Marcus didn't come home. That was what his family, neighbors, and local news assumed. Wrong. This was not a random act. This was not a harmless mishap. And it had nothing to do with whether Marcus did the right or wrong thing. Because the man behind that door, the man with the polite demeanor, the man who invited Marcus inside for a cup of coffee as thanks, did not encounter Marcus by chance. His name was Lucas Hart, 42 years old, living in Inglewood, California, never convicted of violence, no red flags that stood out to authorities, living with two other men, Evan Cole and Ryan Mercer, in a house that looked no different from the ones around it. To neighbors, Lucas was quiet, no trouble, appeared regularly, then vanished on cue. The kind of person you see many times but can't quite remember the face. The kind of person who stands near an ATM or in a parking lot long enough to blend into the background. The kind of person who understands very well the value of politeness. Before going further, it's important to clarify who Marcus Reed was, because he was not just a name on a missing persons file. Marcus grew up in a working-class family, married young, had a young child, and lived by a schedule measured in night shifts, clock-out times, and the familiar route home. No criminal record, no debts, no personal conflicts, no enemies. He was the kind of person society expects to behave properly, help others, avoid trouble, believe that neighborhoods with cameras, streetlights, and neighbors are safe places. For years Marcus lived on that assumption. And it was precisely those assumptions that brought him to Lucas Hart's door. But to understand how this could happen, you need to understand how someone like Lucas exists without being noticed. How he and the men he lived with were present often enough around ATMs, parking lots, security camera neighborhoods, to become a normal part of the environment. Not by hiding, but by blending into the very habits and beliefs communities rely on to feel safe. The motive of Lucas Hart, Evan Cole, and Ryan Mercer did not stem from material need, was not about taking possessions, and was not tied to any direct financial gain that could be explained by ordinary street crime logic. They were members of a secretive hate group that existed in private online spaces and informal meetups, where racist views were repeatedly reinforced until they became the only frame through which they viewed the world around them. In that ideology, violence was not seen as impulsive or deviant behavior, but as a form of purposeful action justified as a way to restore an order they believed society had lost. This group did not seek random victims, nor did they act in a state of loss of control. They selected targets selectively, based on specific, easily identifiable traits in everyday life. Black men, traveling alone, not displaying high alertness, and especially those showing prosocial behavior, like helping strangers or returning lost items. In the view of Lucas and the men he lived with, those behaviors were not signs of morality or community responsibility, but evidence of naivety and vulnerability, qualities they believed made a person easy to control and easy to eliminate without significant resistance. Marcus Reed met every one of those criteria without ever knowing he was being placed in an invisible assessment system. He was black, often traveled alone due to his night shift schedule, had a habit of behaving properly in social situations, and carried no self-defense tools, not out of carelessness, but because he had never had reason to believe he needed them. Marcus finding the wallet and deciding to bring it to the address inside was not what made him a target. It was merely the final confirming signal for what Lucas and his group had been seeking all along. An individual fitting the template they had established in their minds. In this group's logic, Marcus was not targeted because he was a specific person with his own story, but because he represented a category of people whose individuality they had long stripped away. His race, the way he moved through public space, and his willingness to follow basic social norms were interpreted by them as signs. He would pose no significant threat during the approach. Importantly, nothing in Marcus's behavior could be seen as provocative or reckless in the conventional sense, and that very fact reveals the nature of the motive. This was not a reaction to a specific action, but the result of an ideology nurtured long enough to turn a person's existence into a pretext for violence. In the thinking of Lucas, Evan and Ryan, causing harm required no personal reason, no direct conflict, and no exchange. It only needed a fitting target and an opportunity discreet enough to act without interruption. Marcus was chosen not because he did anything wrong, but because he did exactly what society expects of an ordinary citizen. And in that hate ideology, that very propriety was seen as proof he would not resist, would not suspect, and would not realize in time that he had stepped into a situation shaped long before. The scheme Lucas Hart prepared was so simple it was hard to detect, not relying on overt force or direct coercion, but on familiar social reflexes tested many times in everyday life. Lucas deliberately chose ATM areas and parking lots with steady foot traffic, where security cameras ran continuously but were rarely actively monitored, and intentionally dropped his own wallet at those spots during time frames that matched the routines of potential targets. The wallet was not random. It contained full legitimate paperwork in Lucas Hart's name, including a driver's license and valid identification cards, but no cash or valuables that might make the finder suspect a snatch-and-grab trap. The absence of money was a calculated detail, meant to eliminate theft motive and reinforce the assumption that this was just a personal item accidentally lost, needing to be returned to its rightful owner. Lucas's home address was clearly visible inside the wallet, not hidden, not misdirected, creating a single path of action for the finder: either bring the wallet to that address or ignore it entirely. When Marcus Reed picked up the wallet, he did not face a complicated decision. Identifying the owner and address happened quickly, and choosing to travel to the listed address fit the habits and social norms he had followed for years. Marcus did not call ahead, did not phone, did not seek third-party help, because in the context of a quiet neighborhood and a wallet full of legitimate paperwork, knocking on the door to return property was seen as reasonable and safe. For Lucas, the moment Marcus appeared at the door was not coincidence, but the result of a passive screening process that had already taken place. Not everyone who brought the wallet was invited inside, and that decision was made based on quick but deliberate observations of appearance, demeanor, and level of alertness of the person at the door. Lucas maintained control of the situation, accepted the wallet, assessed the response of the deliverer, and only when the criteria the group had agreed upon were met, did he expand the private space with an invitation to step inside. The invitation was not impulsive or mere social courtesy, it was the final trigger of the trap, shifting the target from public space to private space where every element was already under control. At carefully chosen times, Evan Cole and Ryan Mercer were already present in the house, not appearing openly, and creating no unusual signs to outsiders, but always positioned to intervene quickly if needed. Their presence was not to apply immediate pressure, but to ensure that when Lucas decided to allow someone across the threshold, all necessary conditions were in place for the situation to proceed according to plan. The entire process left no clear signs of criminal preparation to outside observers, no obvious lurking, no suspicious initial contact, and no element that would make the wallet finder feel they were being led. It was precisely the normalcy of each step in this chain of actions that made it especially effective, because every decision Marcus made was based on reasonable assumptions about safety and politeness, while for Lucas and the men he lived with, each of those decisions was simply confirmation that the trap had been activated correctly and on the right subject. The security camera footage from the neighborhood captures Marcus Reed standing at the door of the house in Inglewood, California, where Lucas Hart resided, showing a brief, ordinary interaction with no signs of tension or coercion whatsoever. Marcus appears holding the wallet, standing at a polite distance, then steps across the threshold as Lucas opens the door and steps aside, the entire movement taking place in a static frame, with no pushing, no defensive gestures, no unusual reactions from Marcus, and the camera only records the moment he disappears from view, as the door closes behind him. Inside the house, the living space is neatly arranged, with no signs of disturbance or obvious preparation for violent behavior. Marcus is led into the kitchen area, where coffee has already been brewed and placed on the counter, everything unfolding in the familiar sequence of a short, courteous social visit, enough to reinforce the inherent sense of safety that comes with an ordinary suburban home. Marcus consumes the drink without any sign of suspicion, with no immediate reaction, and continues sitting in the kitchen while Lucas maintains a close but non-intrusive presence, enough time passing for the agents in the drink to take effect without creating sudden attention. After a short period, signs of imbalance and reduced reflexes begin to appear in Marcus, not in a way that causes panic, but through a slow and barely noticeable progression, causing his ability to resist to diminish before he can even recognize the change occurring in his body. That is the moment Evan Cole and Ryan Mercer appear from other areas of the house, unhurried and without making loud noises, joining the situation when Marcus is no longer alert enough to respond effectively. The restraint happens quickly, more technical than explosive violence, with Marcus being held down, his hands tied, and his mouth gagged before he can draw attention from outside. The process does not last long, does not produce sound loud enough to overcome the usual sound insulation of a residential home, and leaves no traces of chaos in the main living area. Marcus is then taken down to the basement area of the house, a space isolated from any areas observable from outside, where he is held in a state with no capacity for self-defense, and the process leading to his death unfolds over the next few hours without any intervention from external factors. After Marcus is killed, his body is moved out of the house through a side exit, avoiding areas with direct cameras, and placed into a vehicle that had been prepared in advance, the entire transport carried out during the quiet time frame of the neighborhood. When foot traffic is low, and neighbors' attention is reduced, Marcus's body is then left in a remote area near the Los Angeles River, where the terrain and environmental conditions prevent immediate discovery, while also blurring the timeline between when he entered the house and when he was found. From the perspective of surveillance systems, the chain of events ends at the moment Marcus steps into Lucas Hart's house, a moment clearly recorded, but containing no elements indicating imminent danger, leaving a prolonged visual gap until the consequences of the actions inside the house begin to emerge in irreversible ways. After Marcus Reed fails to return home according to his usual routine, his family waits through the night before contacting local police, and the missing persons report is filed after about 24 hours, in a context with no signs of violence, no recorded personal disputes, and no unusual behavior in the days prior. In the early stage of the investigation, security camera data from the neighborhood where Lucas Hart lived is quickly extracted and becomes the primary orienting factor, showing Marcus appearing at Lucas's door, standing briefly and voluntarily stepping inside, without signs of coercion or stress, a sequence of images that initially leads investigators to lean toward the assumption that Marcus had left his home on his own, for some personal reason or met with misfortune after departing, rather than becoming a victim of violence at this location. That assumption slows the investigative process, since there is no visual evidence showing a crime occurred within the recorded time frame, and Lucas Hart is not considered a priority suspect in the early days. It is only on the 9th day after Marcus disappears, when a body is discovered in a remote area near the Los Angeles River, that the direction of the investigation is forced to change. Marcus's identity is confirmed through identifying features and forensic records, and the scene shows no signs of robbery or property theft, with no personal items missing in the way typically seen in materially motivated attacks. The injuries on Marcus's body, combined with the absence of any clear financial motive, lead investigators to begin considering the possibility that this is a hate-motivated act of violence, rather than a random opportunistic crime. From that point, the area's CCTV data is systematically reviewed again, not just focusing on the day Marcus went missing, but extending to several weeks prior, including cameras at ATMs, parking lots, and routes leading to Lucas Hart's address. This review process reveals a disturbing pattern. In various different frames, investigators identify black men appearing in the same areas, picking up a wallet, and then heading to the same home address, with behavior similar to Marcus's, but in those cases, there are no corresponding body discovery reports, and no missing persons files definitively resolved. The fact that Marcus is the only victim found creates a breaking point in the investigative picture, suggesting the possibility of prior incidents that were not connected due to a lack of physical evidence. As this pattern becomes clearer, Lucas Hart, along with the two men he lived with, Evan Cole and Ryan Mercer, are quickly moved into the center of suspicion, and a search warrant is executed at the house in Inglewood. During the search, investigators seize multiple pieces of evidence directly related to Marcus's case, along with documents and signs indicating the house had been used in similar situations before, reinforcing the hypothesis of an organized chain of behavior. Lucas, Evan and Ryan are arrested between the 13th and 14th days after Marcus disappeared, ending the initial search phase and moving the case into the criminal prosecution stage. Prosecutors later filed charges including murder, organized conspiracy, and hate crimes. Based on the compilation of evidence from the scene, camera data, seized physical evidence, and the established behavioral pattern from the expanded investigation, marking the point where Marcus's case is no longer viewed as an isolated incident, but as part of a deliberate chain of violent acts, hidden behind seemingly harmless everyday interactions. The repercussions of the case quickly extend beyond the scope of a single murder file. When investigators are forced to acknowledge that Marcus Reed is the only victim in that chain of behavior who was found, not because he was the first targeted, but because he is the only case that left sufficient physical traces leading to the body. The remaining cases, though identifiable through camera data and overlapping behavioral patterns, lack sufficient forensic evidence or direct witnesses to reach an official conclusion, leaving their files continuing in the list of unresolved missing persons cases. For Marcus's family, finding the body brings a painful but clear form of closure, allowing the legal process to proceed and enabling them to know exactly what happened to their loved one, while for the other families, the prolonged silence becomes a permanent state, with no confirming answers, no endpoint, and no ability to close the uncertainty about the fate of those who vanished after seemingly harmless acts. The related missing persons files remain open by decision of the investigating authorities, but lack the necessary elements to move to specific prosecution, creating a legal gap where the truth is inferred but cannot be conclusively proven. Lucas Hart, Evan Cole and Ryan Mercer are held in custody pending trial, facing serious charges and a lengthy prosecution process, while details about prior incidents continue to be analyzed piecemeal, insufficient to build independent cases. The house in Inglewood, once the center of this chain of behavior, returns to a state of quiet after being sealed and searched, no longer occupied by those who live there, yet showing no outward signs that distinguish it from surrounding homes when viewed from the outside. The neighborhood continues to operate according to its familiar rhythm. Security cameras remain active, neighbors come and go on schedule, and small social interactions like nodding greetings or taking out the trash to the curb still happen as before, creating an unsettling sense of normalcy when placed alongside what has been uncovered. Legally, Marcus's case becomes the sole anchor for the justice system to act, while the remaining cases exist as unanswered questions with no full resolution possible, dependent on evidence that may never surface. For the community, there is no clear explanatory moment or immediate collective behavioral change, because what happened did not disrupt the surface habits of suburban life, but only exposed an unacceptable reality that seemingly safe, polite, and familiar actions can still lead to irreversible consequences. The case closes on paper with charges filed and suspects detained, but in reality, it leaves a lingering state of suspension, where one man is confirmed dead, many others vanished without trace, and a neighborhood continues to exist as though nothing fundamental has changed, beyond the awareness that not every story has enough evidence to reach a complete ending. The story of Marcus Reed reflects a very familiar reality in American life today. We are raised to believe in politeness, in community, and in passive security systems like cameras, quiet neighborhoods, or no criminal record files. Marcus did nothing unusual when he picked up the wallet, read the address inside, and brought it back to return it. He did not barge into a dark place, did not accept a suspicious invitation on the street. He simply stepped through a door that looked identical to every other door in the suburban neighborhood. That very detail shows that the boundary between safety and danger in modern life no longer lies in places that look dangerous, but in situations society labels as normal. The security camera records Marcus voluntarily entering Lucas Hart's house, and that image delayed the investigation for many days, because it fit the common assumption that if there is no coercion, there is no crime. But the reality of the case shows that technology only records actions, not intent, and the sense of safety provided by cameras can become a dangerous shield for deliberate violence. Another lesson comes from the perpetrator's motive. They were not seeking money, not seeking material gain, but seeking opportunities to carry out a hate ideology. This reminds us that in today's diverse American society, the threat does not only come from profit-driven crime, but also from individuals or groups who view the existence of others as a problem. The practical lesson is not to stop being kind or to live in fear, but to learn to set boundaries. Do not step into a stranger's private space, even if the context seems safe. Do not assume politeness equals harmlessness, and understand that self-protection is also a legitimate social value. In a vast and free country like the United States, trust is still necessary for communities to function, but Marcus's story shows that trust must be accompanied by awareness, because sometimes the most dangerous thing is hidden behind what looks exactly like everyday normal life. If Marcus Reed's story makes you rethink the things that seem safe in daily life, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing true stories you shouldn't miss. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where another very ordinary moment may lead to consequences no one expects.